I, like some of you, have a pile of shame I'm trying to get through. But it's not like a big pile. It's probably like 1 or 2 boxes at most. Okay, it's a lot larger than I want it to be. But what better way to get through it than just start painting some of those minis? Specifically this, my new Goremonger's kill team. What, you think I would show the end product at the beginning of the video? You'll have to wait till the end to... Wait, no. Okay, just don't be so hasty. Just hear me out for a second. I'm basing the color scheme of these minis off of Wolverine, Black, White, and Blood, which I feel like is a great starting point for a paint scheme befitting the name Goremongers. I started off these minis with a white base coat with a Rust-Oleum primer, I believe. And I think they turned out well. There was a few cases where the primer didn't hit the model quite well, so I just had to touch that up with a bit of white, or if it was going to be black anyways, I was just able to paint black over it. And I actually did a test mini, so this is what they'll look like closer to the middle portion of this video. Basically, I wanted to make sure that the paint scheme I was doing would work, because when I did the Death Guard video, it was a lot of trial and error, and that took up way too much time and way too much like excess footage. The technique I used for this was to really make it look like I was dragging a pencil or a marker across a piece of paper, right? Because you want to have it look like a comic book style with the black over the white. With this little part on the base, I really made sure to make those pop by painting in between the crevices. With this one, I also made sure that the mini from one side was pure black. Like pretty much it looked like it was all in just shadow. And then the other side had more of the cartoonish markings on the other side. And this one right here was a mini I painted at one of my local stores, one of their paint nights. It was one of the first ones I'd ever been to, and it was pretty fun. Although I ended up only being able to get there closer to the tail end of it, so there was like only a few people painting there. And a lot of the times in this hobby, the painting aspect of it is usually done kind of by yourself. So I would recommend trying one of those out if there's a game store or a community near you where you can paint with people. I think it's great to have the opportunity to not only get like feedback from other people on what you're painting, but just to be in the company of people with similar interests as you while you're doing your painting. I really made sure to get some white marks on the black, mainly to not lose any detail in the shadow parts. For this paint scheme, we're actually only using 3 paints. The first one we're using is black from Vallejo Model Color and 2 thin coats White Star. As you can see from the destroyed label, my bottle broke, so I had to transfer it to this new bottle. But yeah, this is a paint that I've had for quite a while. I want to say 5 years. So it's been holding up pretty well. And then Blood for the Blood God from Citadel or Warhammer Color. Now we're going to actually mix Uhu glue closer to the tail end to get a stream of blood effect. And here's our first mini that we are painting. This one comes with the... I don't remember what to call it, so I'm just going to call it a chainsword spear. Yeah. Chainsword on a longer stick, basically. And a lot of these minis came with this kind of stone terrain bit on it. And so right here, I'm highlighting, or rather creating shadows on those stones. And you can see that I'm going to thin down these blacks to kind of be a panel liner almost that you would see in Gundam to flow through those cracks. And these bases are from Gamer's Grass. These bases were the non-magnetized versions. So what I actually ended up doing with these was putting underneath magnet paper or like magnet sticker paper so that I can magnetize them to things, to like carrying cases without having to drill through them. Because I did that for 2 of them and it was a big mess. And basically any parts or some of the parts that have like sharp edges, I really wanted to make sure to mark with black to kind of make it look like there's an outline to the white base coat. And any mistakes, I went in with that White Star paint to remove any parts that I overpainted in black. This one right here, I wanted to have the direction of the light coming from the top, so anything underneath it, I just kind of angled the mini and painted it so that it would all be in shadow. And at this point, you can see me adding 2 lines to the chain kind of polearm weapon that makes it look a little bit more cartoony. You can see me filling in these gaps in the chains to make sure to add that shadow while not having to go in with a thicker paint and then go in with a lot more white to fix up the details of those chains. This one right here is one of my favorites. I really enjoyed how I was able to make the white details pop a little bit more. What I wanted it to look like was that the shadow was kind of being all in the front to have sort of an intimidating look. You might have seen some similar scene in an anime where they're kind of towering over, and that's the effect that I really wanted to have with this mini. So I went in with black first and then marked out a bunch of the details in white. At first, I didn't really like these models, actually. So I really wanted to make them my own. So what I did was, instead of using the traditional heads that the kit comes with, I replaced them all with heads from the Battlefield Trophy, or skulls rather, from the Battlefield Trophies box, mostly the ones relating to corn. And as you can see here, my little paint wet palette is actually an Altoids can without the lid. I think I should have left the lid on there, but sadly I didn't. Using an Altoids container is really great for having a portable wet palette for any paint nights that you go to, or if you have a limited kind of color selection and you don't need a lot of surface area on your wet palette. And as you can see here, this mini sadly lost its grenade. It would have been like the 5th time I re-glued it to the mini, so I ended up scrapping that and just shaping the bit that he's holding to look like a nail that he's about to like poke into an enemy or something. And for the tanks on the back, I made a bunch of scratchy marks, these like horizontal marks that basically go in one direction vertically, and it really kind of highlighted those in a way that didn't make the entire tank black, but also was able to add a little bit to show some of that cartoonish detail. And a lot of the abs in these minis actually, I was able to use that kind of panel liner technique where I thinned down the paint and just let it flow through the crevices. This mini right here was a little tricky on where to get the shadows, but I ended up figuring out where they go. Both of those swords, I completely put one side of each of those in complete shadow to really dramatize that contrast between the light parts and the shadow parts. And with these minis, I had a little bit of trouble trying to get the bases the color of black that I wanted. I had to thin them down enough so that they'd flow in between the details, but also thick enough so that they'd be kind of that deep black that went on the mini itself. And here you can see the very fine details that I'm making with that white paint from Two Thin Coats, trying to highlight the eyes and kind of failing, so I ended up going back to fix those. And with this side of the rock, I kind of sporadically added highlights to keep it kind of uneven so that it would look like there was actually smaller kind of bricks on there. And now we're at the leader unit. He's actually on a different base, just a regular Games Workshop base, because the rock on his base was so dramatic and large that it didn't fit on the Gamer's Grass's base that I got. And with this mini, I really wanted to spend the most time on out of all of the minis, because it's kind of the centerpiece model for this unit. I actually got these Goremongers as a part of the Kill Team Blood and Zeal box. I initially got that box for just the Sanctifiers and the Sister statue, and I almost pawned off these Goremongers. I almost tried to sell them to someone else, but I ended up keeping them and making this video that you're seeing today. I believe this is the first like combo box, if you would count it as a combo box, that I have actually finished, so I'm really proud of that achievement, getting through an entire box. It's a lot smaller box, but it's still a decent chunk of plastic to get through. These skulls on the back had a really nice crack in them that I was able to add that kind of wash through them, and it kind of flowed through that detail. And then with the abs here, I actually went in with a thicker paint since I was able to reach them a little bit better, at least for the lower ones, so that the black was deeper and I didn't have to go in with another coat. And with these tanks, I actually went in with a white scratchy highlight instead of the black, because it was more in shadow compared to the other ones. It was kind of leaning down. While there might have been some parts that it might have been nice to leave white, it really helped dramatize the contrast of those tanks. The way I was able to make kind of gradients was having the black parts that were supposed to be like fully black have more lines, and then as I went away from that to white, I was able to make less and less scratches, so that I have that kind of comic book or manga style where they don't always have grays that they can use. So what they do instead is just have a condensed amount of lines or dots to have parts darker, and then still have dots but have them more sporadic and lower the amount so that it almost looks like from a distance some sort of gray. Halftone technique is what it's called. It's whatever this is right here. And this trophy bit was a little bit tedious, but basically what I wanted to do with it was have an outline of it. And on that front kind of circle detail with like that corn symbol, I actually painted it black first and then painted white on top of it because it was really hard to get just the blacks and the crevices on that detail. And here's where I put the really fine detail on his teeth after having that kind of wash of black. Painting these minis gave me a really nice challenge to kind of step out of the element of what I usually paint. I don't usually paint the Death Guard that I painted in the video that I made for you guys, but I usually paint Dark Angels, and I paint those in quite a more literal paint scheme. So it's like, this is where the leather is, this is where the green armor is, right? Whereas this is a little bit different. It's more interpretative. But basically, I kind of had to think in the kind of artistic space of a manga or comic book artist where, or black and white comic book artist, where you're kind of just doing the inking part of the drawing, where you have limited selections of what you can do with your two colors of black and white, but really pushing those to the most extremes. And as you can see here, I accidentally dropped the model because the sticky tack kind of lost its adhesive, so I had to re-stick it on, and I just left that little kind of trophy sigil thing off for now because it was just not going to stay on without me re-gluing it. So I actually ended up super gluing it back on, and that helped quite a bit. And with that, the black and white portion of the minis are done. Next, we are going to do some blood splatter with Blood for the Blood God. This method I actually found from Maverick Nicholson on YouTube, where they took Blood for the Blood God and some water and then put it on a paintbrush and sprayed that paintbrush with an airbrush to spray that paint off of it. And it was kind of tricky to get it where I wanted it to be for the consistency of the paint, to be able to come off the brush while also not being too thin. This part was actually really fun because I hadn't really done any effects like this, any technique like this before. With this final mini, it was really hard to not get it to move around because it was on a different base, and so it was a little bit lighter. And so what I ended up doing was I ended up just grabbing it and holding the brush and the mini in the same hand and taking the airbrush in the other hand to spray it on, which was very difficult, but it did end up working out. And here's how these models turned out. I think the spray turned out really well, and I could have just left it there as is and it would have been fine, but I really wanted to add a little bit more on top. With this blood splatter, I really wanted it to centralize on parts where the weapon is and not the entire mini, right? So like the sharp parts of the chain axes or swords or whatever, or the front parts of a pistol. Before I added the Uhu glue though, I went in with Blood for the Blood God again to really intensify the parts that were quite literally sculpted in blood, or the kind of tips or ends of the weapons to dramatize where the blood actually is. With this brush application, it gives me a lot more control rather than just holding the brush in front of the mini and hoping that it sprays in the right direction. And so this allowed me to really focus on where I wanted the blood to be, such as on the teeth of the weapons or maybe on the tips of the pistols and whatnot. And with the centerpiece mini, I really wanted to over-exaggerate the blood on the front to kind of make it look like he took whatever he's holding in his right arm and kind of ripped it out of a very red and bloody thing. And this is where we brought out the Uhu glue. I tried to use a toothpick, it didn't work out too well, so I actually used a coffee stirring stick, and that helped a lot with having a much larger surface area. This part was really fun. I don't know if I do it for many of my other minis, but for these ones it worked out really well. You can see I transferred the paper I was using with the glue over to a new container because I didn't want to get my Altoids can filled with glue, and it was a little annoying to get it off the paper, so I ended up just using the glue inside of that plastic container for plastic cutters or nippers, I believe. This glue sets really, really fast, and so it was really hard to get it where I wanted it to be at first, but as I played with it more, it made a little bit more sense. I was only able to get basically 2 minis per glue that I squeezed out of the bottle, just because it dried so fast. I had very specific kind of streak or drip patterns in mind for each mini. I think I was able to pull them off to how I wanted them. I really wanted to make sure to follow kind of the golden ratio of direction of where that blood was going. I really wanted it to follow along almost in some sort of curve, even though it can pretty much only go straight, but a curve enough to kind of follow the direction of where I want the viewer's eye to go first. And with this kind of Corin sigil thing, I really made sure to drench it in that Uhu glue. In some of the applications, I mixed it with the paint, but I found a more effective way of doing it was actually putting on the Uhu glue first and then painting on top of it, so that it was able to have some translucency to it. And I was able to control that with the paint application. And again, I applied the Uhu glue very liberally to the main kind of centerpiece model, so I really made sure to do the same with the Blood for the Blood God paint. And after that Blood for the Blood God application on the Uhu glue, I think it's finally time to call these minis finished. I really enjoyed painting these minis. It was really interesting trying to use a style that doesn't use much blending and uses like sharp contrast with the black and white. And I loved experimenting with the Uhu glue blood. It was really interesting to use glue as some sort of mini kind of detailing technique. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you liked what you see. Comment what you thought of these minis. And if you liked them, give it a thumbs up. See you in See y'all next month.